Hello, everybody. Welcome to What Would Your Ideal World Be? A new podcast which examines many important people and the important things in their lives, what they think about most current trends at the moment, what they think about certain subject matters, and of course, what their ideal world would be. David Poulden is a political activist and YouTuber, currently running the successful Project Natter channel. He's been an activist for many years, formerly being a member of the political party UKIP, and is now a member of the Socially Conservative Heritage Party, headed by former UKIP London Assembly member David Kurten. Hello.
Right, there we are. How are we? All right.
Yeah, fine, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Living the dream.
Fair enough.
Mhm.
Thank you for coming on. And the first question, if you don't mind me asking you, by the way, I just want to ask, how long have I got to do this before I switch to your end?
About 20 minutes, if that's all right.
That's fine. Okay, I'll just
Yeah.
start then. Okay, so the first question I wanted to ask you, if that was okay, is if you don't mind me using the colloquialism, is what was your red pill moment?
I think really Brexit. Um, I was naive to politics for a while. You just I was never really interested in politics. Um, I'd never paid the slightest bit of interest into politics whatsoever until we got the referendum on leaving the European Union, and then I saw, how twisted and distort things really were. With the media coverage of Brexit, the politicians, and also, and as you know yourself, I had a Facebook page called the Brexiteers,
Hmm.
um, and altogether, I think, and a couple other pages, but altogether, we had over 150,000 followers,
Well,
and we kept getting censored. This is in the early days, obviously. They were shutting us down with no explanation. We were getting banned for 7 days, and then a month banned, and then eventually just totally removed from Facebook, um, completely gone. And all we were doing was sharing news articles and asking questions about, creating discussions. So that really, for them, really opened my eyes to the bigger picture.
hmm. And given that you weren't hugely involved in politics then, as you say, what made you decide to vote to leave the European Union then, if you weren't as into politics as say some others were, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, for example, with the European Union, as we know, it's an undemocratic organisation run by a bunch of lobbyists. We've got people that were telling us, how to run a country, what we can and can't do. And we never voted for these people. Regardless, I never voted before. For Labour or Conservative, whatever. I always see them as the same party anyway. But these people were telling us, our migration figures, what they should be, and how where we can and can't buy our food from. So they had a lot of control over our laws and stuff. And the deeper we looked into it, I think a lot of people realised that this was a long time coming. So obviously the older generation have been watching the European Union. I think a lot of people were waiting for that vote.
Hmm. And the next thing I wanted to ask you from that is talk about political parties, about the main ones now. You started, if I'm not mistaken, in the Lambeth branch of UKIP, if I'm not mistaken, and now you're a member of David Kurten's Heritage Party. He's a former London Assembly member for UKIP. Why did you make this change, and under what circumstances could the Heritage Party do well, do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of small parties now that potentially could do that. The reason I joined David Kurten's Heritage Party, because at the time when the party was launched, it was pretty much the only party that was standing up for our freedoms, stand up against lockdowns and whatnot. And to be fair, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Nigel Farage, as you know,
Mhm. Same here.
and the Reform Party, as it is now, was, obviously we had the Brexit Party beforehand, but when he stood down the candidates against the Tories and gave them that 80-seat majority, we're in this mess now with this conservative, lefty conservative government, as I call them, solely because of that decision. So for me, whenever Farage has got to a point where he looks like he can make some momentum, really, make some change. He seems to step down. So David Kurten was offering, a party called the Heritage Party. It's about freedom, family, and the nation. And for me, it was ideal, and I recommend anybody who's watching this take a look at the Heritage Party's website, heritageparty.org, and have a look at the manifesto, and have a look at our ideas, and think about joining.
Hmm. And one other thing I wanted to ask is that why did you leave UKIP, if you don't mind me asking, or is that too obvious a question, I suppose, in this day and age?
No, no, no. I mean, totally. I mean, well, to be honest, for me, the final straw came when we had elected Richard Brain as the leader of UKIP, and then he was ousted quite sharply afterwards. They they done a naughty on him. So for me, I thought it's time to leave. There's too many snakes in UKIP, unfortunately. Too many people want to be king. Too many people want to be leader. It's all about ego, and it's not really about the good of the nation. And it's not really about making changes. It's just people power hungry, looking for these sort of prominent positions within a political party.
Mm-hmm. And just for a declaration of interest, I used to be a member of UKIP as well, so it's not like I'm just striking them, for the sake of it, because I used to be a member until Henry Bolton got elected, and oh dear. And the next thing I wanted to ask you was, on that front, is what did you think when Lawrence Fox, who runs the Reclaim Party, when he was on, I think, Talking Pints with Nigel Farage, what did you think of his suggestion that all these smaller parties should unite as sort of a united front against the Conservative Party? What did you think of that? Or do you think that's a good idea, or are these smaller parties better where they are on their own, given the sort of vestiges of difference between the lot of them?
Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, Edward, if you used to look, there's an old saying. I don't know the exact word, but it's something along the lines of, one bee isn't effective, but millions of bees, are. So if you've got one bee coming at you, you just slap that away. But if you've got millions of bees come running at you, you got to move out of the way. And I think there is power in number, and he does have a point. I'll be very truthful. There were a lot of splinter groups from UKIP that have started up in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, if there was some sort of coalition is in the way of certain areas that we sort of make sure only one party standing in that area, whatnot, perhaps that could be a good idea. I don't know, and I think it's for the leaders of the party to discuss it or take it fine. I don't think it was a good idea for Lawrence Fox to tweet David Kurten about this on Twitter very publicly, just dropping him in straight in it like that. I think he should have, messaged him privately and have a discussion, and take it from there. So, I don't know, Edward. What do you reckon? I'll flick it back on you. What do you think?
I think it could be interesting, just simply because I think there should probably be, and I'm a Conservative Party member as well, so declaration right there. But I do think there needs to be someone who keeps people like Boris Johnson and Queen Carrie honest, in a way that, if I'm being honest, a lot of the media are not interested in doing because of whatever reason. And if it means like a coalition of some of these smaller parties, I think that will probably be very effective. But that's just my opinion. I'm not saying go and vote for anyone else before any CCHQ people email me very angrily. I'm just saying there should be at least be, especially because if you have groups like the Green Party and some of these other sort of liberal left-wing parties keeping Labour to an extent honest, I think there should be an equivalent for the right, especially with UKIP gone and Nigel Farage now on GB News, which he's doing very well in. But I just think there should probably be something to fill that void, especially because we don't have a Trump-esque sort of primary system here, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree to a sense, but I think the problem is that obviously that's going to have to be between the leaders of the party. They're going to have to discuss it and work things out, as to if they want to sort of merge or work out some sort of coalition or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And the final thing I'll say on that is it just reminds me of something that Tom Dupree, the former leader of Generation Identity UK, I don't like Generation Identity UK, but he did an interview with a friend of mine called Janea where he said essentially that all these million splinter parties are right of UKIP, but this was back in 2018 to be fair. He felt they weren't going to be very effective and it was time to enter the mainstream, but that's just, you do agree to disagree on that front, I think. The next thing I wanted to ask you was that you're based in London, if I'm not mistaken. I've lived in London for at least like 2 years now. Has London politics got any better or worse since I've left? I suppose I live now in Hertfordshire in Cecil Rhodes' old area, so there's that.
Well, we've got Sadiq Khan re-elected as mayor, so I
Mm.
think we'll just leave it there, shall we?
Why do you think he got in again, given all the appalling sort of records he has on stuff like crime, stuff like on freedom of speech, on the fact that poverty and inequality is getting worse in the capital? Do you think he legitimately is interested in solving these issues? And if not, then why are people voting for him? Not necessarily in droves, but they're voting for him slightly more than the other guy.
Well, there are a number of reasons, Edward. It's not, one thing you can just put your finger on. Obviously, demographics play a big part in that as well in certain areas. A lot of people as well also just vote Labour just because their father did or their grandfather did. I remember being out canvassing throughout London, speaking to people, and we spoke to people and they were like, oh yeah, they're terrible, and we're like, well, why vote for them? And they're like, oh, because that's our party, that's who we vote for. So a lot of them, they didn't like the Labour Party as much. They just vote for them just because they have for generations.
Mm-hmm. I remember, like, I was at the Conservative Party conference recently. There was a guy there from Tower Hamlets who openly said that a lot of it is tribal. Like, a lot of people he speaks to are very just like Labour tribal, just because. On that, do you think there might be a reckoning similar to how in, say, the 2019 general election, a lot of the red wall we saw crumble, Hartlepool fell this year? Do you think that might happen in London, or do you think there's such a stranglehold from many sort of interest groups that that's not going to happen, at least not in the near future?
Mm, I don't know. I can't really see it myself. To be honest with you, I'm. Perhaps got something to do with the minion voting machines they've recently got in.
Oh, really? I didn't know they had that.
Yeah, apparently so. I remember reading. I think it was in the Express or something a while ago. Have a look at that. They ordered Dominion.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, and one thing on that is that what was it? Uh, who did you vote for then in the last mayoral election? If you don't mind me saying, I'm sure one's obvious, but who do you vote for second option? If you don't mind me asking.
I can't remember. It's Dave Kurten, obviously, first, and second. I'm not too sure. I
Mm.
really can't remember. It would have been somebody like Lawrence Fox or yeah, something like that. If it
Mm.
wasn't, yeah, Heritage. I don't know. Can't remember, to be honest with you.
Admittedly, if I was in London, I would have voted because I'm a member and also because I met the guy and I like him, Sean Bailey first choice. But I definitely would have voted Curtin, sorry, Curtin second choice, just simply because I like some of his policies. That's not a slag off against any of the people who appeared on my show as mayoral candidates. It's just a point. And one other thing is that uh, what do you think following on from Brexit, sort of the main issues are now in terms of like political stuff that's going on? Because we hear a lot of stuff about how net zero is the biggest cause of our time and climate change. Insulate Rebellion is going to block your motorway, but they're justified. Like, who do you think? Like, what do you think are the main issues now, and do you think they're being addressed seriously politically?
Well, one of the biggest issues I think is immigration.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the biggest issues with regards to Brexit was uncontrolled immigration. And we've been told time and time again by Conservatives that they'll tackle uncontrolled immigration. We hear Priti Patel talking tough every week. The trouble is, it's all talk, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think
And
that's the biggest thing we face, and I just think, yeah, from my perspective, I think the biggest is immigration. I think, and then tackling left wing extremism. It's getting out of control.
I would agree with both points. I would put civil liberties maybe second to immigration, as in like immigration first, and then civil liberties second, given all the stuff with lockdowns and whatnot. But on
Hmm.
that subject matter, it's just like, what do you think could be done about the immigration issue? What sort of measure, if you were like prime minister now and you had the measures, or like the home secretary, what steps would you take to sort of curb mass immigration, which has been the highest it's ever been in English history or British history for the last like quarter of a century or so?
Well, that's a good question. I'll tell you what we would do. Really, I think you'd have to have a look at illegal immigrants that are already here. We've got, somewhere in the region, I think it's about 60,000 people with visas waiting to be processed. So that, to put that in perspective, that's about the same size of the population of the Isle of Man.
Oh wow.
So I think what would need to be done is we'd have to look at these illegal migrants, deport as many as possible where possible. Obviously, we've always got these human rights acts that that somehow managed to stop deportations. Richard Brain, as you know, he came up with a fantastic idea, which I think Priti Patel's slowly she's mentioned about taking it on board, which was not to let them step foot on our soil. So, the first act they commit is a criminal offence, entering the country illegally. So we should be taking them to, the Sandwich Islands or whatnot, which is just below the Falkland Islands. Lovely weather out there, by the way.
They probably appreciate it.
We'll send them out there to be processed, and they can stay on those little islands until they're processed. And I think that would then send shockwaves through the economic migrant community.
And the final main question I want to ask you before I do wrap up questions is, why do you think so many on the left are pro mass immigration? Because even as recently as, say, like 2013, people like Bob Crow, who were major titans in sort of like left-wing circles, being the former RMT union leader, rest in peace, he said on Question Time, if I'm not mistaken, that mass immigration was not a problem about race or anything like that. It was a matter of like working conditions, being a union leader, so he could see what was happening on the ground. If I'm not mistaken, Tony Benn in one of his diaries noted something a bit similar. And even as recently as now, the most anti-mass immigration guy on the left, at least in Britain, is Paul Embry, who wrote a very interesting piece in his book about this, about how Barking, essentially, when he went back there, Barking Dagenham, with his family, not one person spoke English in the city centre in that area, which was quite a shock to him. So why do you think so many on the left are so pro-open borders, especially because it aids the people they're meant to be fighting against, which is big business leaders?
Well, for them, obviously, business leaders would be, for, the cheap labour as one of us, partly why we saw, the mass flow of migrants come from the EU. But obviously from elsewhere, I mean, for the left, I think personally, they want to flood our country with as many migrants as possible. So they dilute patriotism and nationalism, which is what they're up against. They want a socialist state or a communist state. And the only one thing that's standing in the way of that are people who, are proud of their heritage, proud of, their history and proud of their identity. The only way to destroy that is to break down their identity. That's why we see the left attacking, all sorts of, things. For example, the family unit, they try to break down the nuclear family unit. They're just destroying the very fabric that makes our society. So by flooding the country with as many migrants as possible, they're then diluting nationalism, patriotism, etc. So it's easier for them to get their iron fist in.
And one thing on that point before I ask you the last two questions is that there's an interesting article in the Evening Standard, I'm not sure if you've read it, back in 2009, written by a former Labour speechwriter called Andrew Never, where he openly admitted Labour's policy at the time was to, as he has become well known, to rod the right's nose in diversity. It's called Don't Listen to the Whingers, London Needs Immigrants. Anyone can find it. It's a very fascinating read, is all I can say. It's just a bit surprising he can open his mouth and be that blunt about it. But the penultimate question I wanted to ask you, and this is the title of the show and all the rest of it, what would your ideal world be?
Well, an ideal world would be, everyone, living in a fairer society. Of course, everybody's entitled to, to just to touch on what we were just talking about, immigration. I'm not anti-immigration. I'm just anti, uncontrolled immigration. Ideal world would be not having communism and socialism and all this woke stuff that we're seeing at the moment. If we go back a couple of decades, over the past 10 years, we've seen, politics shift so far left that anybody that was centered is now seen as far right. So my ideal world would be shifting the politics scale back to where it should be. And it is what it is. You're a man or a woman. You're not. You can't identify as a teapot. You're not a teapot. The world's gone crazy. I just want to see some normality.
Literally mad. And by the way, other kins, apparently people who could identify as anyone, and MTV apparently gave them airtime on this. They might disagree with you on that, but they're mentally insane anyway. Fair enough. And thank you for coming on. And if anyone wants to find out more about you and your work, what social media links can they use to find you?
So yeah, just follow up my name, David Poulden, Poulden. So it's at David Poulden on Twitter, or Project Natter on YouTube. I'm banned from Facebook. So
Fair enough. And yeah, thank you for coming on. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and share this video, as well as subscribe to the Ed Interviews YouTube channel, and also the Ed Interviews BitChute channel, and also look at my stuff on Mixcloud as well. I have more of this content coming in, and also subscribe to my Patreon subscribe star as well for more guest requests, as well as free copies of my old books. Until then, see you next time, guys.